He had it all: a first-class ticket, a corner office, a billion-dollar empire. The plane was ready for takeoff, his schedule meticulously planned. Then a simple tap on the shoulder changed everything. A sudden shift in authority, a command to move, and the reason given was as old as the country itself. He looked around the cabin, disbelief turning to cold rage. What happened next wasn't just about a seat on a plane. It was about the line between power and prejudice, and how one man's quiet resolve could freeze an entire corporation. Aidon Cross wasn't just a name, it was a testament. At 42, he stood as the CEO of a global tech firm, an empire forged on innovation and relentless ambition. His life was a study in precision and quiet power. Mornings were for sunrise jogs along the California coast, afternoons a whirlwind of board meetings, and evenings a rare, quiet moment of reflection. He carried the weight of his success with a calm grace, a testament to the long, difficult road he had traveled from the south side of Chicago to the pinnacle of the tech world. His story was a celebrated narrative of breaking barriers and shattering expectations, a beacon of what was possible in a world that had not always welcomed him. Today was a day like any other, a perfectly calibrated cog in his meticulously planned schedule. The hum of the private jet to New York felt like a second skin. He sat in his usual first-class seat, the soft leather molding perfectly to his frame, a half-read financial report resting on the tray table. The flight was a brief moment of peace before the storm of a high-stakes merger negotiation. He was a creature of routine, and this journey was one he had made dozens of times. He knew the crew by name, and they knew his order by heart. The cabin was a cocoon of luxury and silence, a space where he could finally breathe. He closed his eyes, already running through the talking points of the next day's meeting. His mind a finely tuned machine, his focus absolute, but beneath the surface of his success, a quiet awareness hummed. He knew that for many, a man who looked like him wasn't always seen as the captain of a company, but as a threat, a stereotype, or an exception. He had learned to navigate a world that, despite his achievements, often saw his skin color before his accomplishments. It was a reality he faced with dignified resilience, a reality he thought he had left behind in the boardrooms and on the city streets. He had long believed that his success would act as a shield, a powerful rebuttal to the casual cruelties of the world. He was about to discover how thin that shield truly was. As the final passengers boarded, a subtle shift in the air broke his concentration. A flight attendant, her expression tight and unfamiliar, appeared at his side. Her smile was a strained performance. A wave of unease, unfamiliar and sharp, washed over him. The peace he had found just moments before began to fray at the edges. He had no idea that in the next few minutes, the very systems of authority he thought he had mastered would turn on him. He didn't know that this routine trip would become a turning point, a painful reminder that some battles, no matter how much you achieve, are never truly over. The tight-faced flight attendant's strained smile vanished, replaced by a cold, professional mask. She leaned in, her voice a low, chilling whisper. She informed him there had been a mistake with his seating. His ticket, she explained, was no longer valid for the first-class cabin. A simple administrative error. But the words felt like a carefully constructed lie. He sat up, his financial report sliding to the floor, and looked at her. Her eyes shifted, unable to meet his gaze. He simply pointed to his boarding pass, still clutched in his hand. Its first-class designation clear and undeniable. Just then, a figure emerged from the front of the cabin, a white man, his suit impeccably tailored, a confident swagger in his stride. He moved past the rows of seats as if he owned them. The flight attendant's demeanor instantly changed. Her frozen expression melted into a bright, deferential smile. She greeted the man, an easy, familiar warmth in her tone. The man in turn nodded, his gaze sweeping the cabin until it landed on Aidon's seat. He lingered there, a subtle smirk playing on his lips, before he gestured toward it with a possessive arrogance. Aidon's heart began to hammer against his ribs. The narrative was becoming painfully clear. The flight attendant's hushed explanation, the sudden appearance of this man, the deference given to him, it all clicked into place. This wasn't an administrative error. This was a removal, a public demotion, a choice made for the most insidious of reasons. The air grew thick, the comfortable cabin suddenly suffocating. Every eye in the vicinity seemed to be on him, a silent, uncomfortable audience to this unfolding humiliation. He didn't make a scene. He didn't raise his voice. He simply held up his hand, a universal gesture of calm, and tried to appeal to the flight attendant's professional side. But the mask was back. She insisted he needed to move to a seat in the back of the plane. The implication was as loud as a shout. He wasn't just being moved, he was being replaced. Replaced by a man who looked like him, but who didn't. The injustice was a physical weight, pressing down on him, stealing the air from his lungs. The whispers from the other passengers began, a low, unsettling hum that made his skin crawl. He stood up, his movements slow and deliberate, a testament to the discipline he had cultivated over a lifetime of facing down prejudice. He didn't want to give them the satisfaction of an outburst. He picked up his things, his mind racing not with rage, but with a cold, calculated fury. He glanced one last time at the flight attendant, her face now a mixture of relief and a flicker of something that might have been shame. Then he looked at the man who was now settling into his seat, a smug, triumphant grin plastered on his face. The man's eyes met his, and he offered a slight, condescending shrug. This was no mistake. It was a deliberate act of power, a casual cruelty born from the assumption that his status, his success, and his authority were somehow less than another man's. Aidon felt the deep, familiar burn of a fire he had learned to contain long ago. He began the long walk down the aisle toward the back of the plane, every step a public testament to his demotion. He passed faces filled with pity, discomfort, and in some cases, outright indifference. He was a man who had built an empire. Yet in this moment, he was just another stereotype, forced to shrink and disappear. As the first-class doors closed behind him, he knew that the humiliation of this moment was just the beginning. The story of a simple flight would become something far greater, a testament to a truth he had thought he had overcome. But he also knew, with a chilling certainty, that this flight attendant and this airline had no idea who they had just wronged. The true price of this injustice was still unwritten. The plane shuddered, climbing through the clouds. Aidon sat in the back, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on nothing. The humiliation of the past moments was a physical weight, pressing down on him. He felt the sting of 1,000 cuts, the familiar ache of being seen as less. But beneath the humiliation, a cold, focused fury began to solidify. He reached for his phone, his fingers moving with a cold, detached precision. He wasn't calling a lawyer or a PR team. He was calling his second-in-command, a man he trusted implicitly, and his message was a single, chilling command. A few rows ahead, the flight attendant passed again, her face impassive. She glanced back, her eyes catching his for a fleeting, uncomfortable second. In that moment, she believed she had won. She had enforced a subtle but powerful prejudice, and in her mind, the problem had been solved. But she had no idea what storm she had just unleashed. The flight reached cruising altitude. In the quiet of the airline's corporate headquarters, the CEO, a man named Marcus Thorne, received an urgent, private email from his CFO. The subject line was stark, urgent, unforeseen financial crisis. The body of the email was even more jarring. An anonymous order had just frozen the company's multi-million-dollar budget, halting all non-essential spending. Every future transaction, every single one, was now pending approval from a source outside the company. The amount frozen was not small. It was the entire $120 million budget for the quarter. Thorne's face went white. The order came with no explanation, no demand, only a simple, one-line message. Your company has made a grave error in judgment. The flight attendant, her work seemingly done, walked past a bathroom door as it opened, revealing Aidon. He held his phone, his face a mask of resolute calm. Their eyes met once more. He didn't speak a word. He didn't need to. The message was already delivered. He had been given a choice, and he had chosen to fight back, not with anger, but with the very thing they valued most, their bottom line. The plane continued its journey, but the world of the airline had just come to a complete, terrifying stop. The flight landed in New York, a silent, tense descent. As Aidan walked off the plane, his head held high, he knew his work had just begun. He didn't make a scene. He simply walked past the ticket counter, his presence a ghost of the power he had just wielded. Within an hour, the airline's CEO, Marcus Thorne, received an urgent call. The voice on the other end, cool and collected, belonged to Aidan Cross. He didn't demand an apology or threaten a lawsuit. He simply stated the facts, the injustice, the humiliation, and the very real consequences of their actions. A week later, the airline's stock took a devastating hit. Financial news reports were filled with speculation about the mysterious budget freeze and its connection to a high-profile, unnamed tech CEO. The truth, however, was simple. The CEO of the company that managed the airline's financial systems had quietly and legally pulled the plug on their budget. It was a silent, unassailable act of retaliation. The CEO, Aidan Cross, had not just sought revenge. He had exposed a vulnerability that ran deeper than money. He had shown the world what happens when a powerful individual decides to fight back against an institutional bias. For Aidan, the incident became more than a personal victory. It became a powerful, sobering lesson. He had used his power and privilege to fight a system that so many others face with no recourse. He knew that for every CEO like him who could freeze a $120 million budget, there were thousands of people who faced similar injustices every day with no power to fight back. He had won the battle, but he knew the war was far from over. He would go on to fund initiatives for racial equity and launch a foundation dedicated to dismantling systemic bias in corporate America. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a symbol. His quiet act had become a powerful statement. The story of what happened on that plane was not about an angry man seeking revenge. It was about one man's refusal to be diminished, and his ultimate decision to use his power to illuminate a painful truth. The question remains, in a world where some can fight back and others can't, how do we begin to create a system where justice is not a luxury for the privileged, but a right for all?